what you control, and what you don't. Epictetus once laid it out simply. There are two kinds of things in this world, those within your power and those that aren't. Your actions, your thoughts, your values, those are yours. But what people believe about you, that's not. Most people spend their entire lives trying to change things they can't control. They want to be understood. They want to be accepted. They want to be loved, all things outside their hands. When the effort fails, they blame themselves. They think they didn't explain clearly enough, didn't act carefully enough, didn't become agreeable enough. But this is where the mistake begins. How other people see you is never fully within your control. Each person looks at you through the lens of their own fears, their desires, their old wounds. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind only sees what it's permitted to see. People don't see you as you are. They see the version of you their mind allows to exist. There's a simple question most people never ask themselves. Why am I spending my energy on something I can't change? The answer is even simpler, because we were never taught the difference. We waste years trying to clarify ourselves to people who've already decided who we are. And the terrifying part, we never notice it happening. We think communication failed. We think we used the wrong words. But maybe the problem was never the words. Maybe it was the expectation. Society designs your shell. When you're young, society gets to work. Smile more. Be polite. Don't speak too loudly. Don't upset others. Those small rules slowly shape your behavior. Not because you chose them, but because survival became tied to acceptance. Over time, a dangerous equation forms in your mind. If being misunderstood means being rejected, then your authentic self might be dangerous. So you build a mask. Not because you wanted to, but because you needed to exist. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor, understood this. He acknowledged that we're all bound by other people's expectations. But notice, he doesn't say, "This is right." He just says it's real. People like consistency. Consistency makes them feel safe. It makes you predictable, manageable, useful to their purposes. Once a group decides who you are, the good child, the quiet friend, the reliable one, the strong one, every action you take gets filtered through that identity. You seek growth? You have no right. You want change? Immediately, everyone feels destabilized, because if you can transform, they'll have to confront the possibility that they can too, and that's terrifying. A friend of mine was always the responsible one. For 15 years, everyone relied on her. She made the plans, solved the problems, held everyone together. Nobody ever asked if she wanted something different. They just needed her to keep being reliable. The identity became a prison so gradual, she didn't notice the bars closing. Society doesn't usually force you into roles with violence. It does it with approval, when you outgrow their expectations. Growth is the most disruptive thing you can do in a group, not because it's harmful, because it changes the dynamics. You become more confident, and suddenly people call you arrogant. You stop over-explaining yourself, and they say you're cold. You build boundaries, and they begin quietly withdrawing, not because you became worse, because the version of you they benefited from is disappearing. Seneca understood this. He wrote that those around you will try to keep you frozen, not because they love you, but because they love how you function. People don't resent your weakness. They resist the possibility that you might outgrow them. This appears in small ways at first. A longer glance, a comment about changing so fast, an absence when you need them, and you might blame yourself. But it's not your fault. It's the reality of social systems. They don't really want you to change. They just want you to stay. Here's where Stoicism teaches a difficult lesson. You can't control their reaction, but you can control whether you stop growing to please them. A man I knew spent a decade trying to become confident. When he finally did, his friend group shifted. Not dramatically, just slowly. He'd share an accomplishment, and they'd go quiet. He'd set a boundary, and they'd distance themselves. He wasn't being aggressive or unkind. He was just no longer convenient. He told me, "I spent years waiting for them to be happy for me. Then I realized they were only happy when I needed them." The Stoics call this clarity. You begin to see that not all rejection is about you. The mask becomes the face. Live inside a mask long enough, and something happens. You forget who you were before it. Not because you died, but because adaptation runs deep. You start confusing the framework with the identity. The mask becomes the face. I knew a woman. She was always nurturing, always lifting others up. For 10 years she was praised for it. She became the caregiver. Everyone needed her. Everyone leaned on her. But gradually, she felt something hollow forming in her chest, a discomfort she couldn't name. Years later, she told me, "I don't remember what I wanted anymore. I just remember what I was supposed to do." Marcus Aurelius warned about what he called the lead weight of habit. When a behavior repeats long enough, it stops feeling like a choice. It feels like reality. You become enslaved to actions you selected one at a time, never realizing you were building a prison while thinking you were building a home. But here's what's interesting. A mask, no matter how well it covers, can never completely erase what's underneath. You're still there, witnessing. The problem is that the false self gets more social rewards than the authentic one. The obedient child gets praised. The self-abandoning person gets called caring. The exhausted person gets called dependable. Meanwhile, the person developing boundaries gets labeled selfish. So what happens? The rewards reinforce the mask, and slowly you stop knowing the difference between who you play and who you are. They blur, they merge. And one day you realize you've been living someone else's script so long, you forgot it wasn't yours to begin with. The shadow never dies. Epictetus teaches that we should know ourselves, truly know ourselves, not just the parts society approves of, but the parts we've buried. When you suppress an emotion for years, anger, fear, longing, it doesn't disappear. It just changes form. It becomes tension in your body. It becomes unexplainable bursts of frustration. It becomes exhaustion with no clear reason when you're around certain people. A man I met was always cheerful. That was his job, to be the funny one. 10 years in, he started feeling a kind of poison he couldn't identify. Relationships felt shallow. Friends felt distant. Life felt bright, but empty. He said, "I've been making people laugh for a decade, but nobody ever asked if I was actually okay. They just needed me to keep performing." The Stoics understood that self-betrayal always has a cost. Not an immediate one, but one that arrives at the end when you look back and realize you've lived someone else's life. When you deny parts of yourself, they don't vanish. They accumulate pressure, like water behind a dam. And one day, the structure cracks. The shadow forces itself into consciousness. This is why some people suddenly explode after years of silence. Years of adaptation collapse at once. The thing is, you don't get those years back, and by the time you recognize what happened, the person you were underneath the mask feels like a stranger. But there's something important here. Recognizing the shadow is the first step to integration. It's the beginning of wholeness. You can't become real until you acknowledge what you've been hiding, even from yourself. The loneliness of being loved for a lie. There's a particular kind of loneliness. It's being surrounded by people who love you, the version of you they've constructed, while your real self remains invisible. You sit in a room full of people who laugh with you, spend years around you, and you still feel psychologically invisible, because deep down you know they're interacting with an edited version, not the real thing. Seneca once wrote about this state. He said, There are people living in large houses, surrounded by tribes and family, completely alone. Alone because nobody understands them. Nobody really wants to understand, because understanding takes effort. It's easier to adapt to a version of someone that's already been cut down to size. The worst part? Many people never realize it's happening to them. They think they're being loved. They don't know they're being tolerated, the role they've shaped with generations of fear. They confuse acceptance of their mask with acceptance of themselves. And the longer this goes on, the more painful the realization becomes, because you start to wonder, if they don't really know me, how do they actually love me? If I've been performing this whole time, have I ever been truly known? This is where some people begin to wake up. A woman told me once, I thought I had deep friendships. Turns out they just liked the version of me who made them feel comfortable. When I stopped doing that, they disappeared. And I realized I'd never been their friend. I'd been their emotional support system. This realization changes you, because once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. Stoic liberation, becoming real. Marcus Aurelius wrote about what he called prosoche, a kind of active attention, a vigilance. It's not about watching the world, it's about watching yourself. You begin to notice where you shrink, where your voice softens, where you abandon yourself. When you see it clearly, something begins to shift. You stop feeling guilty for protecting your inner world. You stop panicking when misunderstood. You realize something cold about human psychology. Some people need you to remain confused. Your clarity threatens the advantages they gain from your doubt. This is where Stoicism becomes powerful. It teaches the dichotomy of control, the fundamental divide between what's yours and what isn't. You can't control if people understand you, but you can control whether you keep pretending. You can't control their reaction when you change, but you can control whether you stop changing to please them. You can't control if they leave, but you can control whether you leave yourself first. Epictetus calls this proairesis, moral choice, the free will to decide what's good for you, not what's good for them, not what's expected, what's actually good for you. This is the liberation. It means letting go of the need for external validation. It doesn't mean you don't care what anyone thinks. It means you stop organizing your life around their approval. Instead, you look inward. You ask, am I living according to what I actually believe? Am I being honest with myself? Some people won't understand. Some will disappear. Some will call you selfish. But at least you'll know that the person they're talking about, it's actually you. And that's when real loneliness ends. Not because someone finally understands you, but because you finally understand yourself, and it's enough. There's a peace in this. The peace of knowing that your actions come from your actual values, not from fear. That you're building a life that's actually yours, not borrowing one from everyone else's expectations. You stop being a character in other people's stories. You become the author of your own. And maybe that's what it means to be free.